Okay guys, put your berets on because we're going to France. So tonight we're looking at Versailles. So the first question is, where is Versailles? Well, as you can see on this map, Versailles is very close to Paris, less than 20 kilometers from Paris. It's in the northern part of France, close to the English Channel. So what is Versailles? Versailles is actually a small city. However, this is where the French king, Louis XIII, built a hunting cabin. As you know, Louis XIV made it much, much bigger. Today, Versailles is a chateau. It's also a palace. These words are used interchangeably. It has more than 700 rooms, 2,000 windows, 67,000 square meters. This is the palace only. And 0 bathrooms. Now, probably equally impressive to the palace are the gardens at the palace. If you were to go visit and count the number of trees at Versailles, you would count 200,000 trees on more than 2,000 acres of land. To put that in perspective, Square Americana sits on 35 acres and 50 fountains. So they actually had indoor plumbing to the point where they could produce these incredible fountains like the ones you see at the Multi-Plaza. So, if you would like to build a Versailles today, you could set aside $2 billion with a B dollars just for materials. Okay, that does not include labor, and it does not include what it would cost to run Versailles from year to year to year.
Versailles wasn't built in a day. It all began in 1629, when King Louis XIII had a hunting lodge built, replaced sometime later by a stone and brick chateau. King Louis XIV inherited this small chateau. In 1666, the sovereign embarked on major building work. Over 50 years, he continued to extend and transform what became Europe's largest chateau, the Palace of Versailles. Architect Louis Deveau designed 2 symmetrical grand apartments for the king and the queen. Louis XIV moved his government and court to Versailles. After a new program of works, Jules Hardouin Mansart replaced the terrace overlooking the grounds by the Hall of Mirrors, which became the court's main ceremonial reception room. Mansart further extended the palace to accommodate the royal family, the court, and all the government departments. With the servants, the kitchen and stable staff, close to 10,000 people were bustling about the palace. At the end of his reign, Louis XIV moved his bedchamber to the center of the palace. This room was the hub of the king's daily ceremonial routine and that of all the Versailles courtiers. Towering over the other buildings, a royal chapel was finally built by Mansart on the same scale as the palace. When King Louis XV moved to Versailles, he broke with strict court etiquette and fitted out smaller apartments for more comfort and privacy. At the end of his reign, Louis XV built what the palace was missing, a real opera house. Architect Gabriel modernized the facades closest to the town. In 1789, the French Revolution forced the royal family to leave Versailles for Paris. The future of the palace looked uncertain. The gardens of Versailles, created by André Le Nôtre, are a key component of the royal residence. They surround the chateau on three sides. In the 1660s, the east-west axis became the Grande Perspective. The gardens surrounding the palace were made up of parterres, enhanced by fountains. They are extended by paths opening onto copses with surprising lawns and water features. King Louis XIV had the Grand Trianon built in the grounds as a summer family residence and a refuge from the hubbub of the court. King Louis XV fitted out the Petit Trianon for Madame de Pompadour, and Louis XVI gave it to his young wife, Marie-Antoinette. The Queen gave orders for the gardens to be replanted in the English style and built a rustic hamlet, a working farm, complete with cottages.
So where did France get all this money to build Versailles? No, not at Citibank. The answer is mercantilism, which, as you remember, is an economic policy where France tries to collect as much gold and silver and other precious metals as possible, where they explore and maintain colonies where they can get cheap natural resources, such as sugar, coffee, and fur, which they then sell back in Europe for high prices. And the last part of mercantilism is where the French would encourage the French people to buy from French businesses. Don't buy from the Germans or the British or the Spanish. Keep the money inside France. So the big question is, how is Versailles used? We know it's a castle, or we know it's a palace, and the first thing is that it's meant to impress visitors from other countries to really make them jealous. But within the country, it's used to really win power from the nobles. So this is very similar to what Tokugawa Ieyasu did in Japan. Louis XIV of France will make it a social priority for the nobles to live with him at Versailles. So they have to pay to keep these expensive apartments, to wear the finest clothes. So he basically distracts them with a bunch of parties. In addition to parties, he gives them roles or tasks. He involves them in the running of Versailles, and then, before you know it, there's competition to see who gets to do what role. So he's actually making the nobles compete against themselves versus them unifying and then competing against him. These tasks included watching the king wake up every morning. He had about 30 people who were given this honor. This is the highest honor that one could get within France. It's also very weird. It's also nice to watch the king walk through his gardens every day, or watch him eat his meals. Not eat with him, watch him eat. Then the opposite of the first one, watch the king go to bed every night. Again, super weird. But it shows how the king was truly in power here and that he was creating competition among the nobles, so then they're competing against each other and not him. So for tomorrow, I want you to have an answer for this question with specific evidence to back it up, okay? Absolutism, was it good or bad for France? Good night.